Good morning. I'm Anthony Ferguson, a Deputy Director in the Department for Transport. I look after traffic management policy, including new policy on e-scooters. I'm going to talk to you today about the evaluation of national e-scooter trials and share some wider thoughts on our approach to evidence and learning. The trials of e-scooters were originally planned to be run from early 2021 in the 4 DfT-funded future transport zones. The arrival of COVID in March 2020 changed that plan. Trials were brought forward and we opened them up to any local authority wishing to take part. As the slide shows, trials offered a new opportunity for travel during the pandemic, when public transport in particular was not a popular choice. But the main purpose of trials, as had been the case when we planned them originally, was to gather evidence so that we could understand better the likely impact of this new mode and inform our policy thinking. We were coming late to the e-scooter party in international terms, but we had some advantage in choosing how to regulate, which many other countries had not had. In a matter of a few months, we had created and consulted on the legal basis for trials, worked with local authorities to get them going, and established our approach to monitoring and evaluation. Local authorities were running their own procurement exercises to select operator partners, and of the 32 local authority areas that decided to run trials, 10 were selected for user and resident surveys, and 5 for qualitative interviews. Alongside trials, the popularity of private and therefore illegal e-scooter use grew, with several 100,000 scooters on the streets. The coexistence of private and rented scooters has been one of the complicating factors for us. We designed a comprehensive evaluation approach, but we were also mindful of the wide range of other sources that were available. Some of the key ones are mentioned here. Evidence from other countries was extremely useful, given that the UK was behind the curve, though one has to be mindful of the differences between the UK and other markets. Most countries with significant e-scooter use have seen their regulatory approach and public attitudes evolve over time. This means more work for us in terms of tracking the changes, but does provide interesting case studies. And of course, the retailers and operators themselves have experience of many different national markets and regulations, and can provide useful experience. These are the themes we aim to cover in our research and indicate the breadth of what we were trying to achieve through the trials. It's an obvious point, but one of the challenges we faced was trying to allow in our evidence gathering for the circumstances of COVID and the impact in particular of different lockdown rules. Also, for reasons specific to the way their trial was designed, London, which had already seen fast growth in the popularity of private scooters, was one of the later trials to start. I'll pause just for a moment to let you finish reading the words, and then we'll move on. So that's what we set out to do. I'll now move on to discuss what we found. Scooters were particularly and are particularly popular with younger, less well-off males and those from ethnic minorities. We did see an increase in mode shift from private car over time, although inevitably there has been a lot of interest in the number of people who gave up walking and cycling to scoot. The change over time is interesting and perhaps to be expected given the novelty value of e-scooters at the point of introduction. The views of local residents varied from a generally positive view overall, but with concerns about some user behaviour. As the slide notes, the views of residents and the wider population were informed as much by their experience of private scooters as by ones used in trials. An area we recognise could be developed further was in relation to user demographics. There is potential, for example, to increase the diversity of the user base, particularly among women, older age groups and individuals with a long-term mental or physical health conditions. But perhaps some of that hindsight reflects the fact that the trials were accelerated very rapidly, and that the trials were established and the monitoring and evaluation of them was established quite quickly, and therefore it's inevitable there are some things which on reflection we would do differently now. I've noted already that users were predominantly younger males, and those from ethnic minority groups were disproportionately represented. Journeys made by e-scooters were more likely to be for commuting than recreation, and made outside morning peak hours. The reasons given for choosing to scoot or not to scoot seem to me reflect pretty well the views we've heard expressed to us direct or via media stories, and feedback that we get from operators and retailers. E-scooters acted as a mode of transport in between walking and cycling in terms of average distance, and had a slightly shorter average time duration than both. As observed already, the number of scooter journeys replacing walking trips reduced over time, while the shift from private car increased. How that will change over time further is something I'm particularly interested to monitor. Understanding the safety implications of scooters was an issue of great interest within and outside government, and presented particular challenges in terms of the data we were able to work with. Users reported that of those involved in a collision, just under 40% were using a scooter for the first time. Even as an experienced cyclist myself, I can vouch for the fact that the first time you ride a scooter, it can take some getting used to in terms of standing position, stability, steering and braking. In terms of the lessons for policy design, the high proportion of incidents involving those using scooters for the first time may speak to the importance of training for first-time users. Perhaps the main point I would draw from these stats is that, as this is still a relatively new and emerging mode of transport, one must be cautious about the conclusions that can be drawn. This next slide on safety suggests common ground between the types of injuries suffered by users of scooters and cycles, but I am aware of ongoing work, not least carried out by different parts of the NHS, about the nature of scooter injuries. There's a lot of information on this slide, also about safety, but it's not surprising that one's attention is inexorably drawn to the headline figure in the table. Returning to my earlier point about safety, it's important to consider the headline figure in context, not least the point about the prevalence of accidents involving inexperienced riders. The 6 trial areas that we used do cover a selection of different area types, and we're happy to use it as a proxy national figure. It's, simply put, the best we have at the moment. So we published the evaluation report before Christmas. Cue gags about stocking fillers. There's a huge amount in it, and I've given you a helicopter ride over its rooftops. But the report is, of course, not the end of it. The evaluation makes a significant contribution to the evidence base across a range of key areas, including mode shift and safety. But it focuses on rental scooters and can therefore provide only part of the picture. We can use it to make approximate comparisons to private e-scooters, but this is far from perfect. Alongside the evaluation, therefore, we continue to collect and analyse wider evidence. We collect regular data on e-scooter perceptions and usage trends through the DFT's Transport and Technology Tracker. We continue to collect e-scooter safety data via Stats 19, and questions are being collected on e-scooters through the National Travel Survey. We also have a live behavioural research project looking specifically at private e-scooters. We hope to share that more widely quite soon, though I fully expect some eyes to roll when I say that. Alongside this, we continue to consider external evidence of many kinds, including, it goes without saying, the excellent work by PACTS. The trials have been extended twice and will continue now until May 2024. We're learning a lot both from the data we collect, but also qualitatively from our close working relationships with local authority trial leads and their operator partners. Changes have been made to the guidance we provide for the trials based specifically on what we have learned along the way from those discussions with local authorities and operators. As part of the department's evidence and research planning for 23-24, we are thinking about gaps in our knowledge which can help inform our policy development. And I've given you some examples here of the sorts of things that we're interested in. Before the summer, we expect to consult on potential regulatory choices for e-scooters. This is part of our ongoing stakeholder engagement about the potential future legal framework for micromobility and in particular e-scooters. I should stress, though, that before any detailed regulations are made for e-scooters, there will be consultation on that draft law. So anything we do in the summer contributes to the process, but is not the final word. I hope that's been a useful summary of the trials evaluation and some of the wider work that we've done to date and continue to do. So for the purposes of today, I will say what will be the final words, which are thank you very much for listening.